Hello again, time then for the press preview. We'll take your first look what is on the front pages of tomorrow's papers. Checking out the headlines tonight with Huffpost UK's political editor Kevin Schofield and the Director of Communications at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Annabel Denham. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. Very good evening to both of you. We'll chat in a moment after we've had a look at those front pages for you, starting with the Eye, which hears that some Cabinet members are poised to revolt over what they regard as the Prime Minister and Chancellor's lack of a long-term plan for how to deal with the cost of living crisis. Indeed, a poll carried out by the Daily Mail suggests the Conservatives could lose the next election if they don't properly address the issue. The Mirror highlights the presence of Rishi Sunak and his wife on the Sunday Times rich list. The personal finances of the Sunak household are also the main concern for the Star. Let's bring in the FT. It's got word of a plunging US stock market, thanks largely to the impact of inflation. According to The Guardian, police chiefs are likely to apologise for historic racism among their forces, but will steer clear of admitting it was institutional. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has told the Daily Telegraph that NATO may arm Moldova in an effort to put an end to Russia's advance in the region. The Times reports on possible upcoming strike action by members of the RMT Rail Union. Saturday's Express understands at least one member of the royal family is housing refugees from Ukraine. While The Sun has a story bringing new meaning to British-Ukrainian relations. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of the papers while you watch and listen to us. And as I say, I'm joined tonight by Kevin Schofield and Annabel Denham. Great to see you both. So lots to discuss and lots to talk about when it comes to the cost of living crisis and the economy. Why don't we start with the front page of the Daily Mail, Annabel? They've done a poll revealing the toll of soaring prices and say that it delivers a stark warning to the Prime Minister. This is looking ahead to any potential general election.
Yes, this is the poll that's warning Boris that he really needs to get a grip on the rising cost of living. And it really underscores that it is still the economy, stupid, when it comes to general elections. If people feel that they are getting poorer, it is very difficult for the government to remain in power. If they feel like they're getting richer, then perhaps things like Partygate can be more easily forgiven. And of course, people are worried. We're seeing this rising cost of living. I think there's an expectation that things are going to get quite a bit worse before they get better, with the Bank of England itself predicting that inflation could exceed double digits towards the end of this year. And that's ultimately being reflected not just in the polls, but in people's behaviour too. As the Daily Mail points out, the public are making changes to their daily lives to save money. So the Tories really are in quite a perilous situation. They have previously won elections based on being a safe pair of hands for the economy, whereas now they're presiding over, this real cost of living catastrophe to such an extent that you now have some members of Parliament, Conservative members of Parliament, reportedly whispering that the best thing for the party might be to lose in 2024, to regroup and to come back into power at the general election after that. That's how bad people are potentially expecting the situation to get. And all we're seeing really is this on-off policy making, very short-termist measures being introduced, and a lot of indecision that I know we'll be talking about later when it comes to the cover of the Eye.
Yeah, previous Governor of the Bank of England telling Sky News today, Lord King, that there is a very unpleasant period ahead. It sort of brings us on, Kevin, to the front of the Eye in terms of what are we going to do about it. Johnson and Sunak face new cabinet mutiny over the cost of living. We have heard, haven't we, in recent days that there is a split on how to solve this crisis.
Yeah, and we're told that advisors to Boris Johnson are advising against a windfall tax, despite the fact that it is incredibly popular. I mean, clearly putting up taxes isn't a very Conservative thing to do. However, the Conservative MPs I speak to on the right and left of the party are all pretty much in agreement that something needs to be done. The windfall tax seems the obvious way to do it. They say that the profits that the energy companies are making, the oil and gas companies are making, through nothing more than them benefiting from the global spike in energy prices, means that they are ripe for a fresh tax. I don't think the public would mind it one little bit if that money was ploughed into bringing down their own bills. And I think MPs are frustrated. They want the Chancellor and the Prime Minister to come up with something, because right now there's nothing fresh on the table. We know that they announced £9 billion worth of help with energy bills and council tax bills in February, but that's already been banked. That's gone now, and people can't wait until the autumn to the next budget, or because when the energy price cap goes up again in October, bills are going to go up again. So people are really struggling now, and it's now just a case of when rather than if the government does something in the interim to help people get over the next few months. But as you say, there is a split within government as to what that should be. And until they can come together and agree on something, I think the Conservatives are going to languish behind Labour in the polls.
Yeah, quite a few papers, Annabel, going with Rishi Sunak's personal finances, including the front of the Mirror, the fat cat Chancellor, they call him, Rishi's riches. I mean, how fair is it to pinpoint Rishi Sunak's personal wealth? Is it fair cop, do you think?
I mean, I can't personally see why this is on the cover of a few newspapers, aside from our obsession with gotcha journalism, or the obsession with gotcha journalism among some outlets at the moment. And, you know, you have the GMB's Gavin Sibthorpe saying we can't trust this multimillionaire to help us. And I think that really underscores the level of distrust that we seem to have of wealth in Britain today. It's not something that's to be celebrated or commended in the way that you get in the US, but rather something that some people view with a degree of skepticism. My view, unpopular though it may be, is that it's good that our senior politicians can perhaps appreciate the impact that higher taxes have on the wealthy, rather than this assumption that we can just continue to pile taxes on them without any changes to their decision-making or to their financial position. And we have to be aware when it comes to raising taxes that they do have unintended consequences. They do alter people's behaviours. If you increase income tax at the top level, for instance, you might see people reducing their hours or retiring earlier, and you need to ask whether that is to our economic benefit over the medium to longer term.
OK, just want to bring in the inside pages of the Times, pages 6 and 7, a picture of Rishi Sunak and his wife there. But when it comes to Partygate, this is what the Times are going with. Sue Gray plans to publish Downing Street messages about parties. And tonight, Sam Coates has had an exclusive report, Kevin, saying that the Prime Minister met with Sue Gray around about a month ago to discuss that report. What's going on here? What do you make of it?
Well, I can understand why people might be a little bit alarmed. I mean, it's a great scoop, first of all. Hats off to Sam Coates for getting this story. I mean, people are going to think, well, is this a whitewash coming? You know, the Prime Minister has already, in many people's eyes, got off the hook as far as the Met are concerned, only been fined for one relatively minor party, despite the fact that he was at many of them that other people were fined for attending. Now, I think it may well be a little bit unfair. I think anyone who read Sue Gray's interim report at the end of January would struggle to argue that she's anything other than completely impartial and fair. That was highly critical. I think everyone's expecting her full report when it comes out, we hope next week, to be equally, if not more damaging for the government. It may well be this was just a normal bit of process. The Prime, I mean, she is at the end of the day.
Either way, though, it does raise eyebrows, doesn't it? I mean, why would she need a meeting in the first place? You'd think that sort of administrative people would be able to sort of dot any I's and cross any T's or whatever. Why does she actually need to meet the Prime Minister? But even if it was above board, the optics are terrible.
No, I agree. It looks bad, and if there's any suspicion that the report has been watered down in any way when we get to see it, people are going to point at this meeting and say, well, hang on a minute, you had this meeting with the Prime Minister and all of a sudden you've drawn your horns in a little bit when it comes to the report. I think we might have to just wait and see and reserve judgment until we see the report. If indeed it is not as critical as we expect it to be, then maybe you could ask, well, hang on a minute, why did the Prime Minister, who is ultimately Sue Gray's boss, remember, so he does have the power, I guess, to haul her in if he wants to talk to her. But yeah, I agree, it looks bad. And I think we just have to see what the report says before we decide whether it was bad.
Yeah, OK, we're going to have to go to a break, but Annabel, we'll get your thoughts on that story after 11 o'clock. But I think pretty much everyone that's spoken to Sam Coates, who's concerned with that meeting, says that it wasn't about her judgment into Partygate. It was more about the how the police investigation was being handled. But we will discuss that again in a few minutes' time. Meanwhile, coming up, the Foreign Secretary weighs in as concern mounts over a possible Russian incursion into Moldova. We'll discuss that next. Hello again, part two of the press preview. Kevin and Annabel still with us. Annabel, front of Saturday's Telegraph, the Foreign Secretary saying we'll give Moldova weapons to stop President Putin.
Yes, quite a wide-ranging interview, I think, with the Foreign Secretary, but they've sort of focused on Liz Truss disclosing that she wants to send modern weaponry to Moldova, which borders Ukraine to the southwest, and the fears are that it could be Vladimir Putin's next territorial target. So preemptive action in that respect. It would see a replacement of Moldova's Soviet-era military equipment, and soldiers would be trained on how to use it. Of course, this would be quite a significant expansion in the UK's military support in the region. I think the wider point has to be made that Vladimir Putin had hoped that his war on Ukraine would deter further NATO expansion and neutralise its influence. It would stoke divisions among the Western alliance and, talk about a plan backfiring. The opposite has happened. It has happened, and this news today, or that is on the cover of the Telegraph tomorrow, is coming off the back, of course, of the development that Sweden and Finland have formally submitted their applications to join NATO. So a real strengthening of the alliance there, and a change in attitudes among some Western partners.
Yeah, interesting to see that Boris Johnson had a phone call with the president of Turkey, Kevin, tonight, because we know Turkey have raised a few questions, haven't they, about that expansion of NATO?
Yeah, I mean, ironically, given that they are a NATO member, but yeah, I mean, it's important. I mean, the Boris Johnson is. He wants to be seen as leading the Western alliance, essentially, against Vladimir Putin. So, yeah, he's been having lots of these calls. And, yeah, it would have been interesting, I think, to be a fly in the wall of that particular one, because obviously there's a lot of persuading to do. There are concerns, certainly from a Russian point of view, about the expansion of NATO. Annabel's absolutely correct. The whole point of going into Ukraine was to prevent that from happening, so it's completely blown up in Vladimir Putin's face. There's one other thing I just wanted to mention in the Liz Truss interview. She doesn't just talk about Ukraine. She mentions the fact that if there was another Brexit referendum, she would vote leave. She voted Remain the first time, and she also talks about being a tax-cutting Conservative, which I think shows you that, for all that Boris Johnson's managed to get through Partygate, his position is not secure by any means, and there are those like Liz Truss who are obviously still looking to endear themselves to Conservative MPs should a vacancy arise. Yeah, interesting. Goes back to what we were talking about earlier. And very quickly, just want to show the front of the Daily Express. Royal families secretly house refugees. The frustrating thing sometimes about doing the press preview is we get the front pages, but we don't get the detail. It says you've got to turn to page 3, where we might find out who it is.
Edward and Sophie, maybe? Princess Anne? Did the refugees hit the jackpot and get Wills and Kate, I wonder? We shall maybe find out a little bit later. We'll investigate further. Thank you both very much for the moment. We shall speak again in a few minutes' time.